Right, the moving part, I'm dead.
Fenrir's power can be wielded in surprising ways.
I was so focused on the fact that I was doing my burst that I forgot that I had to move to him.
He's put the Colossus to the sword.
Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind, and this set was pretty normal for a livestream highlights set. Speaking of which, for Duty 1 we went to Underkeep as Scholar. The team was pretty solid, so not much out of the ordinary happened, but something that is worth talking about is the fact that all the various weird shapes of enemies in the AoE pools makes this dungeon a pretty solid place for tanks to practice positioning to optimize party AoE damage. I've talked about this before in my tank tips guides, but the general idea is that while tanks typically can do most of their own AoE damage just centered on themselves, not all party members can. So optimally, you want to make sure all the enemies are nicely bunched up. A way to do this is to alternate your positions so that the enemies spread out more have to run into the mobs that are more nicely bunched up, to bunch everything up even more. An especially difficult example of this is the pull after the second boss, where most of the mobs are semi-ranged, meaning they take extra long to close in on you. But also, some of the mobs are unreasonably large, so they don't bunch up very well. We've seen similar packs to this in the past, like in Aetherfont, but the fact everything is kind of ranged makes this one particularly difficult. So if you ever land in Underkeep as a tank, this is a convenient time to practice if you fancy. For Duty 2, we went to Hiding the Healers as Paladin. As we have double melees, the only AoE is my own. In such a situation, it might make more sense to pull less, but if the healer's good enough, pulling more just so the tank can clean up more with AoE is probably still the most effective strategy. For Duty 3, we went to Next to the Overalls, so get ready for the greatest 1-2 spam you have ever seen. For Duty 4, we went to Red Belly's back, alright! But this time we have a bard, so the AoE of the team is suddenly a lot better. So much better that we saved a whole, 5 seconds. Amazing! And then, for Duty 5, we went to Copperbell Mines. It was a pretty solid party too. An interesting little detail about super low level Black Mage is that Webb recently talked a bunch about making sure to step out of Astral Fire when not in combat. If you don't have Umbral Soul, it will take quite a while to fully recover all the MP, and with no Fire 3, switching out of Astral Fire also means that once you swap back into Fire, you will start on Astral Fire 1, so there is a better argument for just sitting in Astral Fire when you're there anyway. Of course, within reason, and below level 20 you don't even have Astral Fire 2. Now, a little trick here after the first boss is that while the packs do reset if you try to collect them all into one of the side rooms, if you carefully pick up the packs on both sides while staying in the center room, you can fight everything all at once, which saves you a bit of time at least, especially in party compositions with more AoE options. Just keep in mind that if you do mess it up and one of the packs ends up resetting, it will probably take you longer overall to do it this way. For Duty 6, we went to Birds and Gobus as Pictomancer, and there isn't really much to say here. Classic Pictomancer one-button spam to victory. For Duty 7, we went to Skydeep Cenote as an instant replacement, and Cat is here. Throughout the duty, it seems that our ninja was the exact opposite of a single target Doton ninja. How about a ninja that never uses Doton? Which would you rather have? Then, on the first boss, our tank dies to running into overlapping bubble AoEs. A tip for this mechanic is that if you are having trouble seeing where the safe spots are, then you can usually live getting hit by one bubble. So going all in on one spot, even if it isn't actually safe, is still better than panic sprinting through bubbles in the last moment and then getting snapshotted by two. On the final boss, our tank first dies to getting clipped by the blue circle knockback, and then later by the double punch half-room cleaves. Remember, the order that the hands glow in is the order that the punches happen, although usually what gets people in that moment is that your eyes are focused on some other mechanic while the boss prepares this one. As a result though, I end up tanking a tank buster thanks to Cat's healing. Despite the things that went sideways, the duty went reasonably well. In fact, another funny incident is that the second boss died right around where the 2-minute burst comes up, so I ended up just letting half my burst go to waste. On the one hand, that's really unfortunate. On the other hand, I have a feeling I would have misjudged whether the tank would drag the pack after the boss up the stairs or not, and had lost out on the Starry Muse anyway. For duty 8, we went to M8N, Arcadion's Howling Blade, when I climb as a red mage. This run begins with me realizing that I did not remember the optimal red mage opener, so I sort of wing it. And of course try my best to get the OGCDs out on time. It certainly isn't perfect. With that, the fight goes somewhat smoothly with a healer death and viper death, but otherwise nothing major. We even make it through the ad phase mostly fine. Then, starting off the second half of the fight, both I and one of the vipers go down to silly mistakes, and that is when all hell breaks loose. I get raised and one of the healers die. They get a raise and then the other healer dies, and also the one that got a raise dies again too. As I just got raised myself, I am running on fumes to the point where I don't really have MP to properly attack. One healer is raised again, but then dies to a raid wide. Then the second healer gets back up again, and finally the first healer gets back up again to stay alive. In fact, the whole raid gets up again, only for that viper to go down again. Then, for the next following Wolf's Reign, the first healer dies once more, and while we manage to get everyone back up again, the next raid wide takes out both a healer and viper one more time, leading into a very scary stack marker, which kills the other viper. We gradually get everyone up one more time, only for the next raid wide to take out the first healer and the bard, leading into yet another stack marker, which ends up dealing so much damage that only the tanks and the healer that just got raised survived, allowing them to use healer limit break. And now that I finally have MP, I can finally play the game again. And things look fine for a bit, only for the pillars to immediately take out both healers. In fact, one of them dies again after being raised, alongside with both vipers going down too. For the 100th time, we managed to get everyone back on their feet again, only for one of the tanks to go down. And for the next Wolf's Reign after that, the first healer goes down yet again, gets raised again, only to go down again. And right at the end, we have a stack marker with everyone alive, but several low, to the point that I deliberately step out of the stack just before it can kill me. But we somehow managed to take home the win. In hindsight, this team really needed to get back to the drawing board. All of us, considering how many deaths we had. But I guess a win is a win. For duty 9, we went to Labyrinth of the Ancients as a replacement monk. Overall, the duty went alright, but something weird happened on some fights. Not really anything special considering how cursed some runs of this duty can get, but on the final boss, our tank did something quite interesting and strange. They pulled Phlegethon further away from the platforms. Overall, this is just a net loss for everyone, especially in the first half of the fight. However, there is an interesting little bit of psychology here. First off, as is usually the case with moving the boss strats, the boss has to move slightly to actually start the Ancient Flare cast, giving us a moment longer to deal with it. Furthermore, by positioning more of the raid really far away from their platforms, this incentivizes more players to stand their ground and take a chance with trying to skip second Ancient Flare. If you're confident it can be done, but it will be down to the wire, then this could be just the push your raid needs to actually make the check, as sometimes the check is missed specifically because some players chickened out early. But this time, we did make it, exactly to the last moment before a wipe would have happened. For duty 10, we went to Toxic Flowers as Gunbreaker. Remember, the poison clouds actually hurt, so do make sure to move the boss out of them. Simultaneously, as this duty immediately ends the moment the boss dies, if you can pick up the adze and just focus the boss otherwise, that is probably the optimal move. Then, for duty 11, we went to Great Gubal Library. Overall, the duty goes well with nothing major to report. I do have two things to talk about though. The first one is a reminder that the discomfort debuff that the gremlins give can be removed by someone else using the /comfort emote on you within a certain range. I believe the debuff increases damage you take slightly, so it doesn't really matter on anyone except the tank, and even then, menuing to find the emote or something might make things more dangerous than they have to be. But there you go. For the final boss, another little tip is that the third wave of adze, where you need 3 players on each platform to resolve it, usually takes place so late in the fight that you probably can ignore it in an average party and just rush down the boss instead. However, if your party stopped attacking much to resolve this mechanic anyway, helping them is probably the faster way to the finish line. For duty 12, we went to the new 7.3 dungeon as ninja, so if you don't want to see that, jump to this timestamp here. That said, we of course went to Meso Terminal. It probably comes as no surprise that I had some difficulty with some of the mechanics due to the fact I'm not as good at ninja. However, that aside, let's talk about the first 2 bosses as they have some interesting mechanics that can be a bit difficult to handle for some. For the first boss, what obviously stands out is its whole confusion mechanic. The one part that I typically found difficult was, once the mechanics spawned simultaneously, was determining which of the mechanics resolves first. And the thing is, it is just a surge of visual clutter that hides the fact that the mechanic that resolves first will show its goofed up timer first. So all you need to do is take note of which knockback is real and which safe spot is real, and then pay attention when the timers appear, as they still appear one at a time. That's it really. For the second boss, each role has 1 or 2 standout details about them. The healer mob will apply doom that requires Ishuna to the healer. The tank mob will use an interruptible attack and also a tank buster. The DPS ones will instead summon an ad, quote unquote, that will damage you until it is dealt with. Aside from that, the most difficult thing to handle, in my opinion, are the spike balls. The spike lines clearly indicate where they hit, the lightning lines slowly move, and the other AoEs from the boss are also clearly indicated. Specifically, the spike balls can be a bit difficult to tell where the safe spots are. I believe you can stay in melee range of the boss while dodging them, but it is a very strict position to do so, so melees tend to either lose a lot of uptime as a result, or die due to overlaps. There are, of course, 3 safe spots for the spike balls, so you simply need to find where the safe spot is that is also safe from whatever else happens. Besides, if surviving requires that you lose some damage, then do that. Someone will be slower than the rest, and once your team starts cleaning up, whoever needs the help will get it, so don't worry too much. The most helpful thing you can do for your team is survive, and then do as much damage as you can. For duty 13, we went to Ifrit Extreme as warrior, and Ilana's here. A rather interesting detail about Ifrit Extreme is that even if everything seems to be going fine most of the fight, what really matters is that you can hold steady through the 3rd set of nails. Otherwise, it just won't work. In the first pull, we do in fact hold somewhat steady up to this 3rd set of nails, but then the fact our scholar didn't seem to be familiar with how Searing Winds worked, combined with us tanks maybe not swapping as frequently as we perhaps should, as well as, maybe, a bit of confusion regarding the chains, all collectively overwhelmed us. The good news is that my co-tank communicated, so we easily resolved the tank swapping issue. While the chains can be difficult to handle, they can mostly be hand-waved if every other mechanic is resolved correctly. Finally, before we pulled again, I made sure to check in that both healers now knew what to do with Searing Winds. even if I knew Ilana already knew. When we got the affirmative, we went at it again. As we close in on the last set of nails, the first issue we ran into was Ilana going down to an unlucky set of AoEs. We quickly recover that and then gradually resolve the nails. But now with the Searing Winds being properly shoved off in a corner, we don't have any massive unnecessary damage taken and can easily manage even taking multiple nails in super quick succession. And the instant the last nail goes down, the victory is assured. Very nicely done, everyone. And finally for duty 14, we went to O11N, Omega, as Dragoon, and Ilana's here again. And this should work as your regular reminder that Larboard means that Omega will strike on its left and then spin, meaning Starboard hits on its right and spins. Another little tip is that the spread markers that somewhat regularly come out tend to leave behind fire puddles, so preferably aim to take them away from the boss so melees can stay in melee afterwards. After that, some tips for the program loop phase. The first tip is that for the first wave of executable tower soaks, keep in mind that on average you should have around 4 melee jobs, including the tanks. So if you're ranged, you should aim to prioritize the farther out soaks. Each tower not soaked gives a damage down, and while it isn't going to be that big of a deal, this phase is actually a DPS check even on normal, so too many problems can wipe you. For the second executable, take note that if the level checker isn't defeated quickly, everyone has a mechanic that will mess with their movement. This usually resolves itself since the level checker is often beaten in time. Finally, the conductive focus needs to be hit a bunch of times with a bonus action for the fight. You don't need to tank LB or anything, just assist with the focus and it'll be fine. Overall, the group did super well aside from minor mess-ups for the majority of the fight, so come phase 2, it was just a cleanup of what remains. Except then both of the healers died almost at the same time, so thankfully we had a summoner alive to raise someone, and then it was actually cleanup. An interesting set, where the most chaotic duty we had was on normal raid, not the extreme. Ain't that something? On that note, we're now 21/40ths of the way through the achievement. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, apparently it is only in the English version that Omega's Larboard and Starboard are weirdly named. In the other languages, I've been told it is a lot more simple to dissect, but hopefully you can let me know in the comments exactly what that means.